In this example, I'm going to show you how to make a timed puzzle. These are fairly common in adventure games. You push a button and you have a certain number of things that have to happen, or your whole game is timed. If you don't, do all the tasks within a certain amount of time, the mansion gets bulldozed, or the reactor melts down, or pirates take over your ship, or whatever. So let's work on how to make a timed puzzle. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a room called room 1, and I have a red button and a blue button, and they are both in that room. So what I'm going to do is when the red button is pushed, I'll start the ceiling collapsing, and when the blue button gets pushed, I'll stop it. So red starts it, blue stops it. And I've got two empty functions here, push red or press red and press blue. So let's make the red one first. I've got a snippet here for pressing a button. So say switches and buttons, press a button, and which object is the button? This is the red button. Oh, no, red button. Red button. There we go. Okay. Would you like to add the sentence? Yes. Okay, so now I can press the red button, and it will call this function. And look, notice here, Lantern added a variable for us called red button pressed, and we have a variable called red button pressed. So this starts off as 0, and when we press it, it gets set to 1. So we're going to say if the red button hasn't been pressed, print click, and then set it to 1. So we can't press it a second time, or we could change the code if we want, but now I should at least be able to say like press red, click, press red. You've already pressed that, right? So that's the if that variable is 0, print click, and then set it to 1. So the next time I push the button, is the red button pressed equal to 0? No. So I don't do this. I do this instead. And I'll do the same thing for the blue button here too. I'll say switches and timers, push a button, and this is the blue button. Okay. All right, so now we can push the red button and the blue button pressed. Why that doesn't like that? Hang on. Not sure why that didn't work. It didn't add my variable, but I just went and added it. I'll have to go investigate. So I've got two variables that store whether or not the blue button or red button has been pressed. Maybe my blue button, I don't really care if I've pressed it already. Well, we can change our button press code. Now, what I'm going to need here is some other variables. I've got to have some way of, well, I've got checked whether the blue button is pressed. Maybe that I can use that, but I also need some sort of timer. I could just call it timer, or I could call it like ceiling timer. Why don't I call it that? Ceiling timer, and I'll set it to 0. I'll set it to 5. I'll make a countdown timer. So I'll make a variable here called ceiling timer, and this is going to store how many turns I have left until the ceiling crushes me. So what I can do now is in my function here for pushing the red button, let me print PR tab the ceiling starts to lower on you. All right, and when I do this, when I push this button for the first time, I probably want the timer to start over. So I had something called ceiling timer, and I'll set it back to 5 just in case, like, the player's gone through this more than once. So now, if I run this, push red, the ceiling starts to lower on you. Okay, great, but I can sit here forever and nothing happens, right? So why does nothing happen? Well, what I need now is an event. So events run every turn, and what I can do is I can say if the red button is pressed, subtract 1 from the ceiling timer, and when the ceiling timer reaches 0, crush the player. So let's go to events, and I'll call this like ceiling event. And what I'll do is I'll say if tab ceiling timer. Oh no, it's if the red button has been pressed. Red button pressed is equal to 1, means yes. Then then we can, print the ceiling continues to fall or something. And now what we can do is let's subtract 1 from our timer. So we'll say ceiling timer. There's a bunch of ways to do this. Minus, I guess the longhand way is to do it this way. Ceiling timer equals ceiling timer minus 1. You could also do ceiling timer minus minus. That means subtract 1 from something. So the single equal sign means evaluate the expression on the right and put it into the target on the left. So take ceiling timer, subtract 1 from it, and put it back in ceiling timer. Now I don't want ceiling timer to ever hit 0, or to go below 0. So maybe I'll say if the ceiling timer is not 0, and how do you say not equal to? Double equals means are these two things the same? Exclamation point equals means not equal to. So I can say if the ceiling timer is not 0, subtract 1 from it. Okay, so now that I've subtracted 1 from it, now what happens when it hits 0? If the ceiling timer is 0, then I'll just print out like squish and kill the player. So there's a built-in function called kill player. So if the red button is pressed, then print the ceiling continues to fall. If the ceiling timer is not 0, subtract 1 from it. If the ceiling timer is now 0, now print squish and kill the player. So let's run this and see what happens. Now if I type VARS, VARS, it's short for variables, you can see that we have ceiling timer is 5 and our red buttons and our blue button have not been pressed. So now let me type press red. The ceiling continues to fall. Okay, now let me type VARS again. You can see that the ceiling timer is now 4. Now if I type wait, the ceiling continues to fall. And if I type VARS, you can see that that is counting down now. Wait, VARS. The ceiling timer is now 1. And now it's going to subtract 1 from it again. It's going to hit 0, and then we are going to be squished. So I'll say wait. The ceiling continues to fall. Squish. You have died. Press any key. All right. So there's an example of have we identified the condition? Like, should the timer be running? Should our timed event be running? And if so, then if our timer is not 0, then subtract 1 from it. And then when our timer hits 0, then we want to do something in our game. Now it's also, just for fun, let's go back to, so hopefully you can see we have if statement, if statement, if statement. So it's like, if this is true, do all of this. And then this says, if this is true, do this. And then this says, if this is true, do this. So in order for like the player to be squished, the button has to be pressed, and the ceiling timer has to be not 0, and then we subtract 1 from it, and then it's got to be 0. So if statements nested inside each other like this are very powerful. So let me go back to the press blue function here, and let me print the ceiling returns to its original position. Position dot, okay. And then, actually I want to do print line. Okay. Now, if that's the case, then the ceiling timer should be set back to 5. And then the blue button should pop out. Or maybe I don't need to print that out, but it's like you kind of got like radio buttons, like you can only push one or the other, pops out or something. And then what I'm going to do here is say that the blue button pressed is now 0. So I've now reset that button. And maybe I don't care here with the blue button. Maybe I always want to be able to maybe every time I press it, it prints click, and maybe we don't care if the blue button's pressed or not. Maybe we only care if the red button's pressed. Yeah, so if the ceiling is collapsing, print the ceiling returns to its original position and reset our variables. Otherwise, maybe we print nothing happens. There we go. I like this. This is cool. So we're going to, when we press the blue button, we're going to print click, and then if the ceiling is collapsing, we'll stop the ceiling from collapsing. We're going to set that variable back to 5, and we're going to set the blue button pressed variable. Oh, no, wait, this is red. The red button pressed variable. There we go. This is the red button. Okay, the red button pops back out. So what we're doing is, here, I'll put in some notes here. Reset the red button. There we go. So pushing the the blue button will reset the red button. I know that's kind of like not necessarily helpful for your particular puzzle, but so if I push the blue button, it said click, nothing happens, right? Now if I push the red button, the ceiling starts to lower on you. Push red again. The ceiling continues to fall, right? We've already pressed the red button. We were just wasting our time here. Wait. Okay, I got squished. Okay, let's try that again, and then let's shut off our timer using the blue button. Push the red button, wait, and let's check our variables. The ceiling timer is 2. Let me push the blue button. Click, the ceiling returns to its original position. The red button pops out. So pushing the blue button has reset the red button there. Now the key takeaway here is not so much this button click stuff, but the event. The event is the big deal here. You've got to, if you have a timed puzzle, you need to be able to identify somehow, is the timer running? Is the countdown timer active? If the countdown timer is active, then you need to subtract 1 from your countdown timer variable. So you might have 2 variables, one that says should the timer be running, and then to store like how long has the timer been running. And then if the timer hits 0, then you want to do something in your game. You know, maybe here when we, kill player is going to call reset anyway and reset our variables. So that's all good. So there's an example of a timed puzzle. You're going to need an event, and you're going to need some variables, a timer variable, and some way of identifying whether or not your timer is actually running. There you go, but there's timer variable, or there's a timed puzzle. If you need help with your timed puzzle, just ask me for help, and I'll be happy to help you.